Hi everyone, it's Nathaniel again. Today I am going to talk about two very different horror stories. I read The Last House on Needless Street probably about a year ago, and it's really stuck with me. And then I just finished This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino, and it made me consider the differences and types of horror stories. So I want to start off with This Thing Between Us. It is essentially a story about Thiago and Vera, and at the very beginning of the story, Vera has died, and Thiago is relating his thoughts and experiences afterwards as if he's writing a letter to Vera, which comes into play towards the end because it deals with how to kind of resolve some of the issues that go on. But all these strange things start off, as the blurb says on the back, which is extremely misleading about the story. But they start off having weird things going on in an apartment they live in, and then she ends up dying in kind of a freak accident. But it turns out that in the long scheme of things, it's not really a freak accident. That it's kind of, it plays into this whole cosmic horror aspect of the story, and how the almost like a curse has been following Thiago through his family lineage. Now, if you consider, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but the name Vera means true, and the name Thiago means supplanter. So she's the one that has all the life in her. She's the one that reaches out to people. He's more of a loner and things like that. But with her dying, he ends up, inheriting everything, the money from insurance and the family and everything like that. So there are elements of it that kind of harken back to Stephen King's Cujo and Pet Sematary. But what he really does with the story, what I liked about it, and I saw some complaints that were actually about how he related it, but by him telling the story and how that feeds into the end of it, I thought it was really good. I thought it was unfortunate that in the end it was kind of, something following him along that he brought into their relationship, but without getting any real spoilers to it. But the sense of dread that Marino brings throughout the story, I think, is really well done. I think that Thiago's somewhat desperation, or his anger at his loss and the way that he has to grieve, and how it just kind of keeps on pulling forward, it was done really well. And as I was reading, I was like, is this horror? Well, it's got the elements of the supernatural. It's of course got the danger. It's got, as things move on and get even worse, then you really do have the boogeyman. You have the unexplained. You have, the threat that comes along with it. So yeah, it absolutely, it falls into the horror side that I think of traditionally. It doesn't have necessarily, some of the shocks, or, the jump scare kind of aspects that you find in certain ones, but it does have, like I said, those elements that you get from Cujo, or you're anticipating bad choices being made, kind of like Pet Sematary. So all in all, I thought that it was really good. I was a little disappointed, like I said, the blurb on the back I thought sounded good, and yet it was a totally different story, really, because what it says on the back is a very small aspect to the thing. Now, on to The Last House on Needless Street. When I read this one, I actually got it because I really liked the cover. I thought that this was just a cool cover, but it kind of looks almost like a young adult, story. And I don't know, kind of weird, but I like the cat on the cover. So The Last House on Needless Street, the blurb inside that one is very minimal, because you can't talk about the story. Because if you talk too much about the story, it ruins it. And it is so well done. I found that, so essentially it takes place 11 years after the character Dee's sister Lulu has been abducted from the lake where her family was. And that abduction resulted in the destruction of her family. I believe her dad dies even in it. And so she is kind of hell bent on finding who took Lulu. Then you come up to Ted, who lives in a house. It's a creepy old house. Ted's a creepy old guy. And he lives in the house with his daughter Lauren, who isn't allowed to go outside, and his cat Olivia, who likes to read Bible verses. And Ted, there is definitely something wrong with Ted. And he becomes, prime suspect number one. So Dee comes and starts looking into him. And as you start going through this story, there's these, I was so tense while I read most of this story, because you just don't know what is about to come up. What is Ted doing? What is this guy? These little pieces that are fed to you through his interactions with other people, or things because he has a hard time remembering time. He's bad with certain elements of, did this happen? There's people that kind of come and go, and you're like, what happened to those people? And it's just dreadful all the way through. And then when you start realizing what is actually going on, it's not even like an aha, because it's not like, ba-ba, there it is, right? It is this kind of slow reveal, and you're just seeing more and more of it. And unlike the things between us, there's a redemptive aspect to The Last House on Needless Street. And yet, it's also even more tragic in a lot of ways. Now, what gets me about this being classified as a horror, and it even says, like at the very front, masterful horror novel and blah, blah, blah. But it, to me, is like, if Gone Girl is horror, because there's no supernatural aspects. Yes, Olivia the cat reads the Bible verses and things like that, but that's, you understand why. And then there's, just like Gillian Flynn's books, like Gone Girl and Sharp Objects. To me, those are almost more horrific, and yet they're completely classified as like mystery suspense. This is more suspenseful than either of those others, or most mystery suspenses that I've ever read. This one, I wanted my wife to read this so bad, but I couldn't talk about it. And I wanted to talk about it because as things were coming up, or as I was thinking of what was going to happen next, I wanted to talk about it, but you can't, because it would take away everything. Because like I said, it's not like it gets to the end and the final reveal. It is this kind of a slow reveal as you learn more and more of what the circumstances are. So that's the two. I got both of these from the library, and I have considered going back and reading The Last House on Needless Street because it was that good. So, let me know what you think if you've read either of these, or if you have special horror books that kind of took you off guard, let me know. And until next time, have a good afternoon.